Talk maybe a little bit just about the importance of the breath. Like I can really understand the importance of the meditation object, but is there sort of an extra thing the way it links the conditioned and the unconditioned, or is it just really a meditation object?
Well, like the breath is used because it's a physiological function. It's happening now. You don't have to create it or imagine it, and you're breathing wherever you are. So you're, whether you're in a peaceful place or a warlike place, and then also it brings you into the present. It'll stop the thinking, the wandering mind. You concentrate on the breath, and to do that you have to stop thinking, and so it's a way of focusing on something that's happening right now that is not going to, get caught up in kind of your ego about, your ego isn't really involved with breathing. And so it's not about how good you breathe or breathing better than somebody else. It's just like this, inhaling, exhaling. It also, as a concentration object, as a samatha practice, it's calming. You tend to go into tranquil states, very refined, into more refined conscious experiences, because as you concentrate on the breath and you stop the wandering mind from getting carried away, then it will lead toward tranquility. And then as a vipassana object, it's the insight practices. It's the pattern of all conditioned phenomena. It's the arising, ceasing, and so that's what all conditioned phenomena are like. That's the pattern. What arises ceases, and then inhaling is like this, and you can only inhale so long, and then you have to exhale. So, and then I noticed when I was developing anapanasati, I found out it's easy to concentrate, to keep the concentration on the inhalation, but the exhalation, the mind tends to wander off. And I noticed that, how somehow this was a pattern. I found it quite simple to be aware of the full inhalation, but the exhalation, I noticed the mind tend to wander away. And just noticing that, you can see so much of just the pattern of, say, how we like inspiration, or we want happiness and inspiration and youth and all the good things. And then when it goes the other way, we tend to look for something else. So in vipassana or in insight practice, you're looking at the way things are, and so you're beginning to notice that this pattern of, how much of emphasis in modern life is about youth and success and good health and beauty and all this, and then how much ignored or unwanted information about old age, sickness, and death is. Because that doesn't inspire the mind. We don't. Most people don't look forward to old age and sickness and death, what we dread. So then the Buddha, is putting so much emphasis on this other side, on old age, sickness, and death, because that's where we tend to lose our, we tend to be most blind, most ignorant. And then the breath is just noticing that myself, how the tendency to always seek when something reached an unpleasant phase, when it's inspiring, everything going well, then when things aren't inspiring, when things are, falling apart, how then one looks for something else, like another inspiration or a distraction. So you're contemplating this rebirth process, how mental it is, how we're seeking rebirth all the time in something that like a sensory pleasure, or distracting the mind with watching television, or doing something when we're bored or frightened or anxious. We want to get away from that, so we tend to distract the mind or seek rebirth in some other condition that is maybe sensually pleasing or exciting or interesting. And then you can't sustain that, when something interesting eventually becomes boring. And then we tend to drop it there and look for something else. So, and just observe that, like in a monastic life, you have a lot of boredom to deal with. It's quite deliberate, intentionally boring way to live, because then you're encouraged to, rather than try to spice it up and make it interesting, you're actually learning to endure to where boredom ceases. Then you begin to find the balance between, you are no longer dependent on having interesting things to do or becoming something. But like the body itself, like your physical body, so you have the sitting, standing, walking, lying down postures. Especially in teaching meditation, you begin with this because you're trying to get people to pay attention to that which is here and now before it gets too personal. Like posture, like sitting, we're not emphasizing the perfect posture, that you have to try to get, but just sitting or standing, walking, lying down as kind of ordinary movements that you do through the day and night throughout your life, and it's a way of bringing attention to the body that isn't vain or trying to exploit it in some way, make it into something else, but observe, like sitting. The experience of sitting is like this, so you're observing the body sitting rather than trying to maybe you have an ideal of how good posture, and you're always trying to make your body do that. And so then the posture becomes caught up with the ego. But the important thing is to use the body as an object because it's here and now. The breath is here and now. And as you reflect like this more and more, you stop this tendency to just be caught up in thinking, analyzing, criticizing. Because that's where, the doubt comes from always thinking about things and trying to analyze and figure everything out. Where in Vipassana meditation, you're just bringing attention here to the way it is, such as something fairly, the reality of now is the body's like this, the breathing is like this. And then you have like the four foundations of mindfulness, where you have like the citta, or the feeling, the vedana. So you begin to notice pleasurable, painful, and neutral feeling just on the physical level. And then when I started doing this, like usually aware of pleasurable and painful, but neutral physical feeling, I never paid much attention to. So I started just noticing neutral sensations, like the way the robe touches the skin or something that's neither pleasant nor painful, but it's certainly, it's neutral. But you certainly, once you pay attention, you can recognize it. It's like this, just one hand on top of the other. Things that, sensations that, one doesn't bother to pay attention to until they start becoming uncomfortable. So as you move toward that neutral vedana, you also start relaxing. You know, it's not exciting or it's not pleasurable, so you're not trying to hold it or you're not trying to get rid of pain and discomfort. But, you know, so much of our experience as human beings throughout life is rather neutral. It's neither pleasant or painful, but it's like this. And then dhammanupassana, like I found that this was like when I went to stay with Ajahn he taught, you know, he instructed me a lot with that, with this observing the citta or the mind itself, because you know, when I came here, I couldn't speak the language and nobody could speak English, so I had to, you know, there's a lot of frustration, you know, trying to figure things out and feeling and various reactions that I'd have in regards to not understanding what's going on or misinterpreting or being frustrated. And then I could easily misunderstand because Thais react differently, and I could misunderstand and get upset by something because of, you know, I would think they were making fun of me or disparaging me. I used to get quite paranoid. And then Ajahn would you know, his whole method was of getting me to look at my feelings, which was, I could do, you know, I began to observe. So, that first year when I was learning the language was, I did an enormous amount of citta-nupassana, because you know, there's so many kind of negative feelings I had to bear with, and just trying to, you know, before he emphasized this, I didn't really know how to deal with it. So, like I remember, just little things, a lot of the rules, and they keep very strict Vinaya discipline. Well, I'd never done anything like that, and then, and so I remember, you know, this respect for the teacher, and so, you know, like when Ajahn Chah come back from alms round, you know, we'd be sitting in the dining hall, and then we'd see him coming, and then maybe most of the monks would get up and run out to wash his feet, and so I thought, well, there's plenty of monks doing that, I don't need to do that. And, you know, so I'd sit there, and then one of the monks said, you should go out and wash Ajahn Chah's feet. And I thought, no, there's so many doing it, they don't need me. This is an American mind. And then I became quite negative about it, so I'd see this happening every morning, and I'd sit there kind of fulminating, stupid, you know, look at what they're doing, you know, I'm not going to do that. And then one morning I had this insight. I saw how miserable I was sitting there thinking like that. So I got up and rushed out and helped wash Ajahn Chah's feet. And of course it stopped, you know, the suffering was gone. I didn't, you know, that was, even though I wasn't, you know, functionally needed to do that, at least I stopped this awful mental, this negative aversion to it. And so I mean, that was quite an insight for me, because, you know, it's so easy, you know, especially if you're not part of the culture, and you're from a different social background, different society, how, you know, you can form very strong views and critical attitudes about how you see what they're doing. And so I began to observe this, you know, because I have a very critical mind. I could began to observe it rather than just believing it or feel guilty about being so critical. So that's cittanupassana, where you're observing the emotional reactions. And then dhammanupassana is where you're really using the dhamma. You're seeing things in terms of dhamma, like Four Noble Truths, dependent origination, and all the rest. You're changing. These dhamma teachings then are the way that you use them to they help you to see things in a dhamma way rather than from personal assumptions or emotional reactions or Western ways of thinking. So it's like you're actually, this word dhamma is, now for me, the word itself, really, before it was like a Pali word in Buddhism, and then you translate it as the truth or ultimate reality or things like this. But then, so it, oftentimes remained like a, and then we tend to incorporate it into English context. We practicing the Dhamma, and we take refuge in the Dhamma, and things like this. But then, in dhammanupassana, Satipatthana, you start knowing Dhamma in a way that isn't interpreted through your own language. And so then the reality is Dhamma, and reality isn't what somebody thinks it is. It has to be seen through wisdom rather than through perception. And so that's like a shift from the conditioned mind to the unconditioned, to awareness and mindfulness.